Hey everybody, good afternoon and welcome FHN Northwest live here at Sportco. Got a little tent sale going on, Barnum.
A little tent sale?
A little tent sale. The annual August tent sale, which is kind of a big deal down here. Dwayne England, the Barnum, is in the house. We got Chef, we got Sherry, David IT's running around keeping this whole thing up and running. We're just getting underway. If you're just sitting down, get up to the table, say hi to Sherry, get your raffle tickets. You get a free raffle ticket if you want to buy additional raffle tickets. They're $1 a piece. We have a ton of stuff we're giving away, and until all these seats are filled, those that are here have a great opportunity to get in on some really good stuff that we're giving away, okay? This is the show of David's.
Yes.
We have David Champ here for Hatchery and Wild. Revisit with him. He was in studio with us several weeks ago.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear the updates on that.
Got some really good information coming from him. We have David Trout, the #1 man in charge over there at Nisqually Tribal Fisheries. Very, very smart man, bringing a lot of good information, what we need to know what's going on with that Nisqually River. That is like a huge component and contributor to all of Puget Sound fisheries, because they're at the bottom end, right? They're at the tail end of where all those fish head. So that South Sound is a key component as to kind of a model of how our fisheries are shaping up to a point. And then we're going to meet with David Stormer, who is the fish program manager for WDFW for the for all of Puget Sound. Right. And we want to kind of get a recap on with him in regards to how well Puget Sound is actually fishing at the start of this year. I would go as far as say is it's overperforming much better than they anticipated. Area 10, I got buddies blowing my phone up this morning. Chinook, Coho, hour and a half on the water, limits 3-4. I mean, just sideways. Sweet. It's really, really good. So fisheries are underway. Lots of salmon to talk about. We're going to do a crab-crusted salmon recipe with Chef and Sherry later on the show. We got a little bit of a how-to segment I'm going to do. It's late summer, early fall, actually, believe it or not. Maybe with that rain yesterday, you believe a little more in the fact that it's turning into fall, and the salmon are starting to nose their way into the river. David Trout will be here from the Nisqually. Speaking of which, drove over it this morning. That is one of those rivers that I look forward to fishing in August. Sunshine, warm weather, beautiful opportunity. That thing is punched. Right. This freaking rain, that thing is milked up and looking horrible. And unfortunately, that river typically runs nice and clear. Great opportunity to fish eggs under a float. And when it gets to those conditions... It's
interesting because, I mean, you don't think we had a whole bunch of rain last night, but, I mean, that thing is chocolate milk.
It was, yeah, it was kind of heading that way from the other day. We had some rain up in the hills. And I fished it, and actually the morning I was down there, as I went upriver, I could see it was starting to turn. And then the next day, drove over it, and I'm like, oh, now it's turning into milk. And this morning, I was like, we're done. Right. It won't pretty much clear up for the whole season. Wow. So flossers are going to have a heyday. They're going to do just fine. But bait fishermen are going to struggle to get fish on the Nisqually. So that just means you got to get out in front of it, get back out in the Sound, hopefully, if you have opportunity, and get in the boat and make it happen. So, you know, fish reports are coming in, Puget Sound and whatnot's fishing well. And that's where you need to be until we get into our September, October opportunity. Right. Few things going on relative to WDFW, some announcements that came out, Barnum. Area 7 is closing for shrimp. You've been able to shrimp in Area 7 up until now. Yeah. August 12th, they figure they'll be up against the quota. So we're shutting it down for, you know, coon shrimp, spot shrimp, all that. No more shrimping Area 7 as of August 12th. And then an interesting email came across yesterday. You know, we've kind of had discussions referencing Columbia River management between Washington and Oregon.
Yeah, we've had a few discussions.
We've had a couple.
We tend to get a little fired up about that.
Well, so let's face it, they're not on the same playing field. No. Washington and Oregon are managing shared waters, completely different programs. Yes. They have meetings scheduled, and this still kind of gives me a little bit of personal frustration. We have August 29th, October 1st, November 18th. Now, if I'm using the correct calendar, and I think I was, none of those days listed are on a Saturday. Right. Commissions typically meet over the course of a Friday, Saturday for Washington. Right. And they're open public meetings.
In their normal commission meetings.
Correct. Right. So this is a joint committee comprised of 3 commissioners of each board, comes together to discuss management of the Columbia River. It even says, or goes as far as to say, the goal of these meetings is to continue to work and improve Columbia River fishery management and have current policies that work for both states. And that's from Ryan Lathrop, and he is now the policy coordinator for WDFW. So they're working towards bringing like-minded policies together to manage that fishery collectively, but yet they won't even schedule those meetings on a day where most working men and women would be able to attend the meeting. So it's still a little frustrating. We voiced our concern on that relative to wolves.
Yeah.
With Bo Olson and Tony Winthrop was in studio, and we had a great discussion.
And you got an update here recently from Bo, right?
From Bo, and he said the powers that be were listening to the frustration thanks to our show and the conversations we had with those guys.
Right.
And of course, to remind you, our Bo is in the Blue Mountains and an outfitter, and he was very frustrated with the fact they're holding these meetings while those guys are, in the woods working. So now they come back and they say, hey, we're going to have these meetings relative to wolves, but we're going to go ahead and schedule them at a time when you guys are available.
After the season.
After the season. So hopefully, when it comes to fisheries management, we have the opportunity to see that move forward. In other words, make those meetings, I don't care if it's a joint meeting between commission or whatever has to happen, let's have those meetings on days where people can show up, because it is to their benefit to hear from the folks fishing the waters. Right. Much like the guys hunting in the woods.
Right, and I think it's important for fishermen to, go to the WDFW website, find Director Suswin's email contact information, and hit him up with emails, constantly reminding them, hey, we're working folk, we want to attend these meetings. Let them know that you're frustrated with the process.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's the easiest way to get your point across.
They are carrying the flag of transparency.
Right.
We have, again, as we advocate a lot on the show, we have a lot of contacts and friends that work within WDFW.
Right.
And we want our voices heard, and we try to do our part to, show both sides of the playing field and make sure everybody's on the same page. And we're just trying to get access to the people that make the decisions.
Right.
And we want to make sure that they're listening to us and those that are out there on the water spending the money, those that are out there in the woods spending the money. And if they're going to make changes come about, it needs to benefit all.
Yeah, the squeaky wheel gets the grease.
That's right.
Always.
So we are down here, Barnum, at Sportco for the annual tent sale. There's a couple tents out front. The beard is running around here. He drops about £1 an hour.
Right. There is, and I'll tell you right now, there are some crazy deals. I walked in, I seen a price tag on a gun safe, and I'm leaving here with it.
Are you?
I mean, that's how good of a deal it is. Like, as soon as I seen it, I'm like, buying
sold,
that.
Yeah.
Sold.
Yeah, you don't get up here much.
No, the deals are insane.
Yeah, so there is a lot of stuff out there in the tents. There's stuff 50, 60, 70% off.
Right.
If you need it relative to fishing gear, hunting gear, clothing, our buddy Herzog used to show up here every August and buy his wardrobe for the whole year. Then they quit selling tie-dye, so he was like 50% less of his wardrobe he could find here. But he would still get his camo and his slippers and whatever else he needed, his smoking robe, all that stuff. But they have amazing deals out here. If you are watching online right now and you've never attended the Sportco tent sale, it goes on for, what is it, Tony, 3 weeks? About 3 weeks? And they have these amazing deals day in and day out for the next 3 weeks or so. It started Thursday. We're having our show here live today because this is a relatively busy Saturday for Sportco, the first Saturday of the tent sale. Jen, the hot dog lady, is here, which we partook.
Yep,
how
delicious
could you not?
hot dogs.
You're like peanut butter and a hot dog?
I didn't know.
Sour cream and peanut butter? You're going to go home and try it, though.
I might.
Here, Stephanie. Try this. Great food, great people, smoking deals. You definitely want to be here. If you're just pulling in and paying attention to what we got going, come join us back here in the camo area. We're set up. We got the portable studio. Chef's over here chopping away. We have great interviews coming up with guests. We got some how-tos, and we'll be here for the next couple hours. Tons of giveaways. Every commercial break, while you're sitting home watching the commercials and the sponsors, by the way, what?
Someone's gonna get to eat.
Oh, yeah, I'll get to that. We have raffle tickets we're giving away. You can buy extra tickets for $1 a piece. We have kokanee rods from Northwest Rods. We have a ton of gear from Bomac. We have a bunch of stuff from YBC, Yakima Bait. We have a bunch of gear we're giving away from Potskis. We got a crab pot from Bomac SMI. All that stuff's going out of here. We have clothing on sale. We have hats. You go over there and talk to Shing. She's going to set you up with our Fish on Northwest wares. We have decals. It's all here. We're blowing it out, right?
And if you just sat down in the chairs, there is a white plastic sack under you. That sack is yours. It's a grab bag just for showing up.
Grab bag for showing up.
Right.
And make sure you get your raffle tickets, because every commercial break we're raffling off a couple items, and we're going to hold the big stuff to the end. That keeps people in the seats, I found out. So try to keep folks here. It's starting to fill up, so get down here before this all gets filled, or you're going to have standing room only. And yes, when Sherry and Chef are done making this crab-crusted salmon, something like that? Yep, crab-crusted salmon. 2 people from the audience are going to get to sit at this wonderfully decorated table, done by Sherry, of course.
How do you even come up with this stuff, Chef? Crab-crusted salmon.
Yeah, it's as good as it sounds, right? 2 folks in the audience today, we're going to randomly draw. You're going to get to sit at the table and take part in tasting exactly what it is Chef whips up every week in our kitchen at home. So I think that's about all of it. You got anything else you want to add?
No, I mean this is the greatest time of year right now.
There's so much to do.
I mean we're slamming freezers with salmon. We're trying to get ready for hunting seasons. I mean, this is a sportsman's dream. The end of August, first part of September.
Crabbing is still happening in Area 9. Crabbing is happening out at the Buoy 10 fishery. Our buddy Austin showed us some photos the other night. Grab a seat, folks. Get your grab bag. Get your raffle ticket. Yep, thanks for stopping by.
Fisheries all across the Northwest
Chef
are just
landed a dandy upriver bright the other night down there at Buoy 10, right? Threw back a bunch of toolies. The fishing is actually going well. Buddies blew up my phone this morning. Area 9 closed down as of yesterday. Area 10 is fishing off the charts. It's going to continue to be crowded. Area 11 starting to pop. Guys out in front of the Green Cannon 13 are picking up a few.
Willowpaw has been up and down. They've had a few good days and they've had some slow days. Sounds like today's been a little slow, but I mean that fishery is going to explode any minute. We have a very busy week ahead of us. We're fishing Wednesday, Washaway or Willowpaw, somewhere down there. I'm fishing Area 10 on Thursday. Got to be back in time to do the show Thursday evening. So you're going to have to put that one together. I'm busy. So we'll put it together on the boat Wednesday. Okay, we'll do that Wednesday. Friday, I'm back fishing Area 10. We're back out to Willowpaw. Saturday might be a day off before Sherry and I go for 3 days. We'll be up in Seattle attending the Theodore Roosevelt Conservation Network group. They got a media 3-day event up there that we get to attend. It's going to be fantastic. We're talking salmon recovery at Puget Sound. We're talking orcas. We're talking land management from different various groups and conservational groups. Chase Gunnell, who was with us last week or 2 weeks ago, he touched on some of this stuff. Now we're actually going to get and sit for 3 days with some of these folks at That's exciting.
Yeah, it's really exciting because they're at the national level, at the federal level, and we're going to tour the Ballard Locks. Going to take. I haven't seen that since I was a kid, so. No, very, very busy 10 days or so for FHN, and glad to line all this stuff up. It keeps us going. But so much to do and see right now, you just can't hardly, decide which way to go. But and we got elk season to get prepared for, so shoot your bow. Oh, get warming up on that archery. Get that bow strong, get it to work. In between fishing trips, you got to get your bow. Start bringing your bow to the house every Thursday, because we need to start shooting before we do the show. With that, we are going to jump out with a break. You're going to turn off your mic and belt us out of here with a subtle bugle. This is why I fully intend on being successful getting my elk this year, because I got my #1 caller to the right of me that's going to sing you a little song right now as we jump out for a quick break. We come back, we're going to have David Champ, Hatchery and Wild Coexist. He's going to be sitting right here in the hot seat, tons of questions. And if you in the audience have questions, David has a microphone. We're going to ask you to stand right up front here, and you can fire away on questions. We can hear you. Folks at home watching can hear you, because we're just that good with technology. And that guy over there. So keep that in mind. If a question comes to your head and you want to fire away, we got a microphone for you to join in and be part of the show. With that, Barnum, kick us out of here for a break. Don't go anywhere. We come back. We'll have David Champ following this.
At Metals Supermarkets, we understand your need for fast access to a wide variety of metals, so we've made it easy. Our network of stores carries a wide variety of metal in all different types, shapes, sizes, and grades, with no required minimum order size. Who could ask for more? Simply tell us your dimensions online, on the phone, or in store, and we'll cut or process the metal to your desired size, often while you wait. We offer same-day service and can deliver the metal right to your door or job site. We even source hard-to-find metals, so no matter what you're looking for, Metal Supermarkets can provide it for you. And we're conveniently located with brick-and-mortar stores in Seattle and Portland, so you can check out our extensive stock for yourself. Superior customer service is guaranteed. Quality service from real people who know metal. We are the small quantity metal experts. To place an order, simply call a store to talk to one of our knowledgeable customer service representatives. Fill out a quote request online, order off of our e-commerce website, or visit one of our many locations and pick out the metal you want. Whether you're a small or large business, government, homeowner, or hobbyist, we make it easy for you to buy the exact metal and just the amount you need. We've been doing this for over 30 years, so we know how to get it done. Metal Supermarkets, the convenience stores for metal. Visit or call a Metal Supermarket store near you today.
Hey, welcome back to Fish Hunt Northwest, Wayne England, the Barnum, and our first guest in studio on the Mobile Road Show, David Champ, Hatchery and Wild. How you doing, buddy?
Hey, it is an absolute pleasure to be here. Took a day off from Bowie 10.
I know you did.
Just to drive all the way to Fife, Washington.
Yeah.
And I tell you, when I pulled in the parking lot, this place is an absolute madhouse.
Isn't it crazy?
Right.
I wound up parking well over a block away.
Yeah.
It is going on outside.
So you got your walk-in this morning.
Right.
I
This
did.
afternoon. Perfect.
I did.
I like how he just said he took a day off from fishing Buoy 10.
Yeah.
Yeah, isn't that terrible? So it's a vacation day from fishing.
We were talking at the break, and retirement is not overrated.
No, not
Fishing
at all.
is where it's at, and you got to be pretty happy with the production of Buoy 10 this season going into it.
You know, we went into it with less than enthusiastic lookout, and it has started off on fire.
Yeah.
My first day fishing was Tuesday.
Right.
We were done at 8:30.
Wow.
We made one pass, we were done. Get this, we had 7 bites, 7 hookups, and landed all 7 fish. How often do you get
One
to do
drag.
that? One drag, it
Wow.
was done.
Triple sevens, right? You just hit the jackpot.
And the guys fishing with me were like, already?
Now what do we do?
Exactly.
Yeah.
We go have breakfast.
I
There
take
you
it you
go.
weren't using those faulty hooks, you know, the ones that are missing the barb there?
No, actually, we're using those new owner herring hooks.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Those things are rock solid, let me
Right.
tell you. So the next day, you go back out with high expectations, right? You crush them on Tuesday,
Yep.
Wednesday,
Yep.
all day, fish till 2 o'clock in the afternoon, had 1 keeper.
And you know what's crazy is when you are fishing throughout a week like that, your tides maintain consistency.
Yeah.
They're just 45 minutes later.
Yep.
So you would think, well, okay, we're going to leave same time because we might pick up that early fish on, the bottom end of the outgo or whatever the structure of the tide is. but you're like, well, we might as well just do it again. We'll go fish the same areas, same bait. We know what works.
Right.
And you go out there and get blanked. I've talked to a handful of guys this year that have just absolutely crushed them. They go out, same tactics, same techniques. They get a handful of hours into the morning, and they're like, what the heck? Nothing's changed. Barometers stayed the same. Weather systems haven't changed. Barnum, we've seen this. Happens on the Willowpot, happens in Puget Sound.
Right.
I think what it is?
And I think really on the Columbia Estuary, it's just the fact that those fish are moving. They're not hanging around. They're on the move.
Yep.
But at this point, we've got good Chinook tides. We've got the real flat tides, so they're not moving a lot.
Right.
So we expected that they would still be hanging in the same general vicinity. No.
No, you get blanked.
But we've had a
Tuesday
little
you crush them. Wednesday, one fish. Thursday, we crushed them again in the same spot we crushed them on Tuesday.
Yep.
So then you go back on Friday. No.
Right.
So I don't know what's up.
This year has been a little different weather year for the typical August, though. I mean, we keep having these little low pressure fronts come in and bring some rain and some fresh water. We're normally in August, we're 95 degrees every day going, oh my God.
How about the dry lightning last night?
Yeah.
I haven't had sunglasses on all week in Astoria, and it dumped last night. It rained really good. So to a degree, I'm glad I'm not out there.
Take a day off.
To be honest with you.
It can be a grind.
Yeah.
It can be a bit of a grind. You don't want to push it so hard you're no longer enjoying yourself. Sometimes you got to take a break, and just day off, come sit here and talk to these fine folks and not just talk about fishing. Let's get right into it. Hatchery and Wild. Your guys' your Facebook page is blowing up nicely since the last time we met.
Yeah.
You've kind of changed the campaign a little bit. Same message for the most part. You guys are getting it out there. What's going on with Hatchery and Wild?
Well, let me give you an update on 3 fronts, okay? So I'll talk about how we're changing our narrative, how the message is changing, and we've got a big update coming there. I'll tell you how we're going as far as developing our partnerships. That has been off the hook. We're really excited about what's going on in that arena. And then finally, if we have time, I want to follow up with a capital campaign that we're just getting launched.
Yeah.
So first of all, what we're trying to do when it comes to the Hatchery and Wild Coexist campaign is change the narrative. For the last 20 years, hatcheries have been getting a bad rap. They are being blamed for the demise of our wild fish. And that's simply not true. If you look at our hatcheries, why they're there and what they're intended to do, without hatcheries, in many, many cases, we wouldn't have the fisheries that we enjoy today. In Oregon, 2/3 of the hatcheries are mitigation hatcheries. So they are hatcheries that are designed and constructed to mitigate for the loss of wild natural production. Production that's gone. It doesn't exist anymore. There's not an opportunity for those fish to reproduce in the wild. That was acknowledged.
Yeah.
That deal was made a century ago.
And this just isn't like, somebody throwing random thoughts out there on paper. This is scientific data.
Right.
This has been proven. There are those that are disputing the message from Hatchery Wild and disputing your information you're bringing out here to the people, and they're saying there's no scientific backup on that, and I dispute their claims because there is. There is plenty of evidence and science and data that you guys are supporting this information with.
Well, when it comes to the science, there's contradicting science.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of studies out there that show that hatchery fish are bad for wild fish. Or I shouldn't say bad for wild fish. That's a misrepresentation. So the science shows that hatchery fish have an effect on wild fish. Mm-hmm. And if you think about that, everything has an effect on everything.
Yeah.
Right?
Checks and balances.
So that's a layup. So you add a hatchery fish into the natural environment to say that it's going to have an effect on the natural environment, that's a given, right? So in the last 20 years, there have been studies that actually show that hatchery fish can have a positive effect on wild fish. And then there are many studies that show no effect. Now, that's where you get controversial, right? Because I just said a study showing no effect.
Right.
But at the same time, we acknowledge everything's going to have an effect, right? So to say there's no effect is getting somewhere you really don't want to be, particularly from a science standpoint. So we qualify that with no quantifiable effect So no measurable major effect on abundance or reproductivity. So they're having an effect, but what is the significance of that effect? And just our own experience shows that it's not having the effect that the anti-hatchery folks want us to believe.
Well, and for years we've been fed this understanding that the competitive nature or the competition for survivability in hatchery fish competing in rivers, in estuaries for the survivability of these wild fish. And, you know, there were those that rayed in and said, well, it's because we're dumping too many fish into the system. The wild fish are not finding enough food source. They're being, you know, overtaken by all these hatchery fish. And you got to think back to 75 years ago, long before man intervened in really messing up our fisheries. And the rivers around here, Puget Sound and beyond, were just teeming with fish. And it was a natural cycle of fish spawning and dying, decomposing, adding nutrient base to the systems, and their offspring's survivability numbers were extremely high. I get all that, but back then we didn't have the imbalance of habitat loss. We didn't have the silt runoff from all the years of logging in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. We didn't have the lack of shade on our water systems and upper systems to where the water temperatures now have increased. Yeah, we had pristine habitat for these fish to rear in and survive. But even early on, when we started dumping the hatchery fish in, it wasn't the numbers of hatchery fish that were the demise of the wild fish. It was just an inability of overall survivability, and we then saw those hatchery numbers continue to go down too. But then they got to a point they said, well, it's all caused by hatchery fish, so we're going to remove all them from the systems.
Right.
And we have not seen in 25 years these wild fish come back.
Right.
That whole thing that they've brainwashed us with to say remove the hatchery fish, the wild fish will rebuild, it hasn't happened. Now we're up against the orca, catastrophic dying off of our orcas.
Right.
And all the research and studies that have gone in to support that. And if you're in the camp of still not believing in the necessity of getting these hatchery numbers back, you are in the camp of saying, well, the orca is just the next flag that these hatchery, supporters want to carry. Well, they got to find a reason, right, Barnum, to dump hatchery fish in the waters.
Well, let's think about a situation we have right now where we have hundreds of thousands of sea lions that we haven't seen sea lion populations like this maybe in 100 years. So if you go into a situation now and you shut down hatcheries that aren't putting out a food source for these sea lions, the native fish runs are going to get obliterated coming into the estuary because there's going to be no volume of fish for those sea lions to feed on so that the hope of a native fish can make it through.
Yep.
You know, you're going to release 300,000 sea lions on a reducing number of native fish, and they're just going to go extinct in 4 or 5 years.
And they're a lot faster, more equipped, and higher numbers than the orcas. They're going to get to the salmon first. Yep. They're going to get to the outbounding smolt first. The harbor seal in the South Sea is one of the #1 predation problems on the outmigrating smolt. It doesn't matter if it's hatchery or wild, right? The numbers are there, and they're consuming mass quantities of millions of pounds. And now the returning adult salmon are intercepted. And the orcas are starving. We get that. It's not just a ploy. It's not just a bunch of, hatchery managers, Dave, that say, hey, we got to find some slogan or campaign to increase our hatchery numbers. No, there's, again, a lot of evidence and proof that we do need to get these hatchery numbers back up. We have areas in Puget Sound. Hatchery production has been diminished since the 90s by 65 and 75%. We're talking millions of salmon no longer being pushed into these systems. So as we move forward and changing the narrative, getting folks to understand that putting hatchery fish back into these systems is not detrimental to survivability, until we get habitat back to where it needs to be for the wild fish to slowly begin to rebuild, we have to support and supplement with hatchery fish.
Absolutely, and there are many examples out there where it can be shown that hatchery fish actually increase the abundance of wild fish.
Right.
So done properly, hatchery fish can be good for wild fish.
Do you have some of those examples?
And that's what we're advocating for, is changing our hatchery practices to where we're producing the most fit fish possible. Right. So fish that can survive in the native or the wild environment and have the least possible effect on those wild populations. Right. So you look at the sockeye. they were down to what, 2 fish,
Yeah.
1 fish?
On the snake?
And they've been able to rebuild that entire run
Right.
through a properly designed hatchery system. So we're not saying all hatcheries are good. We recognize that past hatchery practices are not what we would like them to be,
Right.
and we need to make some changes. But that's going to take a reinvestment in our hatchery system, not deciding we're just going to shut it down and shutter up all of our hatcheries. That's not the direction
Well, as we
should be
discussed
going.
before when you were in studio, past practices were more down the line of, high numbers are good. And I kind of would throw a phrase out there like, we basically took a certain strain of Chinook and carpet bombed the entire Puget Sound with it, to a point that we mixed stocks, mixed genetics, and we have this compromise now of genetic strains that every contributing water base in the Puget Sound has a certain DNA factor that's equivalent. And then the other majority part of that is the genetic line of that existing fish that was there previously. So we have a mixed stock. Now what we're talking about, and if you've been following our show, you know that we advocate for this and are on board with everything you guys are promoting and doing, this in-basin broodstock
Right.
management program that we need to achieve. And if we just look at the Puget Sound Basin, if we have Nisqually stock, and we're going to have David Trout in here later on talking about this specifically, we're keeping those within basin. Yeah, there may be a skosh of Chambers Creek in there. There may be some type of mixture in that DNA footprint, but it is what it is now, and it needs to remain what it is now.
Right.
Right? We're not going back to
We
what it was.
can't go back and
We
undo
can't.
what's been done.
Nope.
But we can start here and do better going forward.
Yeah,
And that's-
Skagit fish, whatever the DNA footprint of those are now, broodstocking within basin, that's what they are moving forward. If you drop down a little further south, we get into Green River, Puyallup, all the way down to Nisqually. Those basins, as they are now, recognized. And same thing's going on in Oregon. They almost set the bar for broodstocking, in my opinion.
Yeah, we're ahead of the curve there. So
Big time.
That's a
Yep.
good thing. That's a
Some
good
of you have some of the rivers down in Oregon that they have shown an increase in fish coming back now that we're broodstocking some of these Chinook programs.
Well, whether it's Chinook or Steelhead or whatever, but you look at the Sandy Basin, you can look at the Clackamas Basin where they have used hatcheries to surrogate back the numbers of our wild fish.
Right.
So again, if you go to our website, we actually have a list of examples there. So for me to sit here and try to give you a list off the top of my
Sure.
head,
Yeah.
you're not going to get an accurate one. So
It is all listed there. I remember reading through it before.
Right,
Yep.
right. And so, that's a good segue to talk a little bit about our website. So
Yep.
it's intended to provide good, solid information for folks that have an interest in this subject. We didn't get it right the first time. We can do better, and we are doing better. We've listened to the feedback that we've got. A lot of it is criticism. A lot of it is, hey, do this instead of that. We've listened, and this week we'll be putting online a very significant rewrite of the information on our website.
Oh, okay.
Again, responding to the feedback that we're getting from folks to make sure that we're giving the best information that we can in a way that's meaningful and helpful
Yeah.
to them. Real quick, the campaign itself. So the last time we talked, we probably had a handful of folks that were on board and supporting Hatchery Wild Coexist.
Yep.
One of the very first was Sportco, I
Yeah.
want to say. They
Yeah.
stepped up right in the very beginning. Huge uplift for us. Fish Hunt Northwest was right there in the very beginning.
Yep.
Well, you guys should be happy to know at this point you've got about 65 additional companies and organizations that have jumped on board with you
That's
to
outstanding.
support our campaign.
Yeah.
If you follow us on Facebook, we try to acknowledge every organization and every business partner that jumps on board. We can't keep up. That's how
Good.
exciting the news has been there.
Yeah.
And it just continues to snowball. So
Right.
we're really excited. We've had folks that want a list of the organizations and businesses that have signed on
Yeah.
so they can support those businesses. That list is changing so fast, it really wouldn't do them a lot of good. So here's what we're suggesting. When you do business, ask them if they support Hatchery Wild Coexist.
That's a good
If
point.
they say no, ask them why not, and give them the information,
Right.
show them how they can contact us, and then that provides an opportunity for us to contact them and get them on board. We'll do the follow-up. We just need folks to extend a hand and say, hey, this is a good program. We think you should support it.
Right. Absolutely.
And that's how we change the narrative. Everybody talking to everybody, everybody reaching out and gaining strength in unity and in numbers. You know, the Patagonia artificial documentary that many have seen.
It's on my list to ask you, so thanks for bringing it up.
They tear up hatcheries.
They do.
So how many have seen artificial?
Anybody watch it?
Has anybody seen it? Right, so those of you that haven't seen it, I'm going to ruin the ending for you. So if you don't want to know the way it ends, cover your ears.
Yeah.
But at the very end, they put up a great big black screen, and in huge white letters it says, hatcheries and fish farms are driving our wild fish to extinction. So they blame hatcheries, and they say that a fish farm and a hatchery are the same thing, and we all know that's not the case. That the reason our wild fish numbers are declining is because of hatcheries. As I just said early on, 2/3 of our hatcheries are there to mitigate for the loss of natural production. So if hatcheries go away, you got nothing.
Yeah.
70% of the salmon and steelhead harvested in Oregon come from hatcheries.
Right.
80% of the salmon and steelhead swimming in the Columbia River come from hatcheries.
If hatcheries go away,
Fishing
you're going to
goes
be
away.
buying your fish from fish farmed, raised fish in pens, which are inundated with disease, chemicals,
Orcas are going to
antibiotics.
starve.
Yeah, I mean,
So-
it's
So Patagonia wants you to believe that all we have to do is close all of our hatcheries, and bang, overnight, all of our wild fish come back, and the orcas have more fish to eat than they know what to do with.
which is a pipe dream, because we've already discussed and we've proven that the past 25 years, the major cutbacks we've seen in our hatchery production has not lent its hand at bringing back wild fish already. So to simply remove all hatchery fish and think that that's going to be the catalyst to get these fish to all of a sudden come back is an absolute absurd pipe dream.
You know, I think Patagonia is really trying to do the right thing. I think they are truly trying to act on behalf of our wild fish, and who's not for that, right?
Yep.
We need to do everything we can to improve our wild fish numbers. But they are obviously misguided when it comes to the information that they're using. And unfortunately, I think they're doing a huge misservice.
I do too.
Because they're
Absolutely.
talking to folks that don't know the difference between a bluegill and a Chinook salmon.
Yep.
I mean, that's just the reality of it. Not everybody fishes, not everybody knows about these fisheries like we do.
Right.
It's just not their world.
No.
So they're relying on that information they're getting from Patagonia, and it is false.
Right.
And that should scare the bejesus
Well,
out
I
of
think a lot of it
anybody
is
that's
Patagonia
interested
is
in-
relying on the information that they're getting from the fish advocacy groups,
Right.
and it's jaded, completely jaded.
It is
Completely
biased
jaded.
beyond.
And it's money driven.
Yes.
Right.
And they're marketing it to, as you just kind of mentioned, to all of those persons, the percentage of our populations that don't fish and hunt and don't truly grasp
Right.
it. They're hitting the major
Exactly.
metropolitan areas,
Big time.
people who live in these major cities and are not outdoorsy folks, because it's all about the money.
You are not going to see a Wild Fish Conservancy booth in front of Sportco during the tent sale.
Absolutely not.
It's not going to happen
No.
because they know that you're
Political
educated,
suicide,
and
right?
you know
You're
the
not going to be
difference.
jaded by their false
Right.
information. So we got to fight it on our hands.
Right, and that's how we counter it.
Right.
Obviously, Patagonia, huge company, deep resources, deep pockets. We don't have that.
Right.
So the way we counter it is by forming a huge coalition of interested people, supporting businesses and organizations. Our voice needs to be louder than their voice.
Right.
And so that's the second item. First is look for an update on our webpage. Second, encourage the businesses that you support to support us. Go to our webpage, sign on. We've got an opportunity there for you to join the fight. It doesn't cost you anything to be a part of this. Same is true for your business friends. We're not going to hit them up for a donation in order to be a part of Hatchery Wild Coexist. And the third thing I want to make sure that we get an opportunity to talk about just real briefly is we're starting a capital campaign to fund an economic study. So we can get into a debate about the science when it comes to hatcheries versus wild, right? Because there's science in their favor and there's science in our favor. But when you look at the economics of our fisheries, it is huge.
Huge.
Everybody in the Pacific Northwest somehow, from a business standpoint, is connected to our salmon and steelhead fisheries.
Yep.
Whether it's a service station, a restaurant, a hotel, a car dealership, obviously boat manufacturers and sporting goods stores are a direct connection, the guiding industry, everybody somehow has a link to our salmon and steelhead fisheries, and they need to be concerned about what's happening. The anti-hatchery narrative is getting louder. In Oregon, some of you may be familiar with the Leeburg hatchery. It is one of those mitigation hatcheries that I talked about earlier, built by the Corps of Engineers, maintained by the Corps of Engineers, until 2 years ago when they decided they were going to walk away from it.
Yeah.
Gave the state of Oregon the opportunity to take over that hatchery. We were able to get funding for 1 year. This last legislative session, we went back to get funding for additional years. The governor didn't include it in her budget. It took all the way until the very last minutes of the legislative session to get funding approved by the legislature for that hatchery. The final minutes of the legislative session.
Did Kay Brown now sign off on this?
The governor had 30 days, great segue. The governor had 30 days to sign that bill to author, and she had line item veto. So she could go in and cut out the funding for the hatchery without affecting funding for other things in that bill. She signed it on the 27th day.
Oh, she did finally sign it.
She has signed it, so
you and I
great
talked
news
last
there.
week, she hadn't signed it.
We got the funding for Leeburg, but I think folks need to realize that that's really a wake-up call.
Right.
So it wasn't that she signed it, but a message is being sent. The Oregon League of Conservation Voters, which is the largest, most influential environmental group in the state of Oregon, actually sent the governor a letter asking that she veto the funding for the Leeburg hatchery.
Okay.
So again, the anti-hatchery proponents are getting larger and louder, and we need to be positioned to counter that.
Yeah, we sure do.
And in Washington State, we're in a tough spot because we know we have the WDFW budget woes. We know that these organizations like the Pound the Fish and Wildlife Agency have litigation. So what's the easiest way to eliminate the litigation is to just use the budget woes as a way to start closing hatcheries.
Absolutely.
And we're at a really scary spot right now. Really scary spot.
They're gaining numbers, as you said. It's all driven by money. And our voice just needs to be louder than theirs. And we need to continue the fight and continue to educate folks on the necessity of hatcheries to, sustain our fishery opportunity, keep the recreational folks on the water, keep the money dumping into the economics. There's a much bigger picture to this thing than just, us getting our opportunity to go out on the water, which we all enjoy. But that is the end result if everything goes in the right direction as it should.
So a big 2-page ad in the last issue of Salmon Trout Steelheader magazine that launches that campaign. Everybody asks about sweatshirts and hats. Everybody wants to wear some Hatchery and Wild Coexist swag. This is your chance. So check out that ad. It will be in the next issue of Salmon and Steelhead Journal. There will also be an ad in the next issue, I believe, one of the next 2 issues of Sportsman's Magazine. So the word's out there. This is your chance to support directly activities within the campaign. We want to be totally transparent. We want to tell folks what we're spending the money on. We're a totally volunteer organization, so it's slackies like me that are spending our personal time making this thing happen. So no, the money's not going in anybody's pocket. I'm not going out and buying a new boat with your dollars. We're using that money for specific purposes to move this campaign forward.
Perfect. Well, you're doing a great job. Everybody here is nodding their head in support of Hatchery and Wild Coexist.
I got stickers for everybody.
Fantastic. We'll make sure we hand those out at the break. Appreciate you making the drive, man. Always good to see you. Appreciate your involvement and your continued efforts, and we support you guys 100% moving forward. So
thank you for the opportunity to share the information with you great folks here.
Perfect. All right. Appreciate give Dave a round of applause there, if we would. Nicely done.
Keep up the good work.
All right, we're going to jump out for a break. You're going to hand out stickers and information packets. We're going to do a couple raffles, give away some prizes there, Shane. So we'll do that. We come back. We're going to do a little how-to segment on some bobber and egg fishing, one of my favorite times of the year. Get you guys spooled up and ready for fall tributaries, which is just around the corner. So we want to be on top of that. Don't go anywhere. Jump out for a break. A couple folks here are going to win some nice prizes as we go to commercial. We'll be back right here on FHN.
And I moved down. Is that the...
Here so I can keep an eye on you, or I can see you without having to turn my head. How much time we got? Oh, we're live. Except we got somebody in front of the camera. Here we go. Welcome back to Fish on Northwest. We're live. Got the annual. Oh, my microphone? Hey, how about? I think it's good. You guys hear? All right, we are back here at Sportco. I'm going to talk a little bit about river tributary fishing. One of my favorite things to do. Bobber and egg fish in our rivers when these Chinook and coho start heading into the river. Yes, believe it or not, you can catch plenty of coho fishing eggs under a float. I know a lot of guys love to do the twitching thing. You can run plugs, you can cast plugs. There's so many different ways to catch coho, spinners. I mean, you name it, there's opportunity. But if you're a bait guy like me or gal, eggs under a float just flat out gets it done very, very well. Mostly though, as we get into early fall, we're targeting Chinook. And for me, there's a handful of different ways to fish floats, indoor free drift for drift fish for Chinook. And for those that have sat through my seminars before, it's not a lot has changed, because when it continues to work for you and you catch a lot of Chinook throughout a season on eggs under a bobber, you just kind of stick with it. Basically for me, I will approach riverbank using at least a 10 or 10.5 foot rod, typically rated in that 10 to 20 pound. Lately I've been running these Lamoglass rods. They work fantastic. A lot of different rod manufacturers out there. Stick within your price point. You know, you want something that's well balanced. Find a reel that sits on the length of rod that you're going to use, and you want to make sure you are picking up reels, whether it's spinning or a casting reel, These newer reels nowadays, you can get them in that 20, 22, 24 pound drag, which is fantastic when you're getting into those big Chinook. So if you're gonna spend the money, look for something that has a drag you're not gonna burn up in short order. Don't get an open face level wind bass reel, put it on your Chinook rod, okay? It's not gonna last. So find yourself a good combination. You don't have to break the bank. You can get into a decent rod and reel for a couple $100 that's gonna set you up pretty well. I like to fish braided line. Anytime I'm float fishing, you'll see that I fish braided line. Typically with a top shot of monofilament, upwards of about 18 to 20 foot of mono. It gives me some trim ability throughout the day so I don't have to replace that top shot. And that is the line that's down in the water underneath the float typically. The line on the surface is your braid. You don't want to use counterproductive measures as in float fishing with monofilament on your rod. You have line that sinks and you have a float that's trying to stay on top of the water, okay? It doesn't work. So braided line, top shot of mono. I typically run 50 or 60 pound braid. Not that I need that strength, but I like the durability of it. It's thinner diameter than your monofilament, so you can put a lot of it on your spool. The thing is, when you get hung up or you break off, when you pull tight against that, it likes to bury that braid down into its spool. Because it's so thin, it just finds its way down in there, and it's really hard to get out. If I'm running a 30 pound braid, it cuts in there even deeper. So I will run a 50 or 60 pound, it doesn't get deep, okay? I'll top that with a top shot of, depending on time of year, springer fishing, you can usually get away with like 20 pound monofilament. Typically this time of year, I'll put on 25 pound mono as my top shot, maybe 30 if I'm fishing around a lot of debris. Lower hump tulips with a lot of wood and debris and stuff that fish can rub against once you hook them up. So use line that's appropriate for the type of holes or water you'll be fishing, depending on structure and root wads and rocks and those types of things that are in the water. Do not use your top shot. You don't need to use fluorocarbon. First of all, fluorocarbon sinks more than monofilament. It doesn't have as good abrasion resistance. The newer ones tend to, but I still stick away from fluorocarbon unless we're talking for leaders specifically. My top shot is always a good sturdy, like Maxima Ultra Green is extremely durable, a very good top shot to use. So basically, and I'm talking a vertical. I'm not one of those guys that likes to offset my floats and things with a swivel and a cannonball hanging off the side or anything like that. When I run vertical presentation, everything is completely vertical. My float is typically a 1 ounce float. I fish a 5/8 inline sinker underneath it. I got a stopper bead. I also put one of those Bomac stopper eggs under my float because if by chance my leader doesn't break and I break it off at the weight, just by simply spending the 3 cents on that little bobber stop right there, it actually keeps me from losing my entire setup. And my $5 bobber will stay on there simply by adding that little stopper underneath it. And or if I decided to fish a fixed float, I can slide that up my line, bring my top one down. I can actually pin that float on my top shot line and I can fish that as a fixed float now. I have that ability. If I wanted to slide, I simply bring that back down to that inline sinker. Now I'm fishing a sliding float, which is typically what I do. Inline sinker, again, 5/8. The reason I match that 1 ounce with that 5/8 is because the size of egg lob I put on for most Chinook kind of weights that down pretty good, and I don't want to overweight my float to where it's riding in the water column and all I see is the very top of that. I like to make sure it's up out of the column and I can see all color contrast on my float, because sometimes those Chinook, when they pick it up, it's the very smallest wiggle or it's a very subtle depression of movement. And if my float is buried to that, I typically don't see that movement because I have no contrast and visibility, okay? So don't overweight your float to where it's buried deep in the water column. I'll run about a 20-inch leader. I do run an inline weight halfway down my leader. I've gone to utilizing, again, a Bomac bobber stop on my leader. And I used to even fish a sliding egg sinker or something on there, but now I even take that small diameter hollow core lead and I cut about a 1-inch piece on there. It weighs just about a 1/4 ounce and it's perfect. It's low profile. It seldom gets hung up. If you guys are putting a pinched on sinker onto your midway point of your leader, because if you're fishing eggs and there's no weight from your inline weight to your eggs, these eggs at times are floating higher in the water column than you would like them to. So you need to get weight closer to your bait, but you can't be within 12 inches of your hook. So keep that in mind. Set your stopper 12 inches from your hook, slide your very low profile, small diameter weight down there. That does wonders for getting that bait down into the water column at the depth you want it to be, when you want it to be there, okay? Everything's vertical. I typically run dual hooks for bait fishing. I like to have the glob of eggs that's up there on my first hook and a fully exposed trailer hook underneath, or a stinger hook. Fishing rivers like the Nisqually, you are not allowed to fish two hooks in tandem under a single floating presentation. So what I do is I take a lower priced branded hook, like a 2 or 3/0, and I basically cut the bend or bottom of the hook off, and I tie that top shank onto the leader. And then I also have the main hook at the base, which you tie on first, right? Then we're tying this shank on there. That allows me to have an egg loop that I put the eggs in, and when there's a glob of eggs hanging in that one, I have a fully exposed hook underneath it, okay? Talking with game wardens, perfectly legal to do that because I have one single point barbless hook, and I have the ability of an egg loop above that, and I have that hook exposed. And people look at me when I fish a 3/0 or 4/0 hook as the only hook that's going to get into a Chinook's mouth, and I say, I got one chance. And you can fit a beer can in a Chinook's mouth, okay? So I can run a 3 or 4/0 hook to make sure I get it good penetration and down into that jawbone where I want it to hook up, okay? If I'm going to release that fish, I'm going to release it after I put hand to tail, not before it gets to my riverbank, okay? So make sure you run a decent sized hook. You're running strong enough fishing rods and strong enough line that when that bobber buries, you reel down, take the slack out of your system, and when you set that hook, you're going to bury a good sharp hook. If it's a 3 or 4/0, no problem. Where you can get by with it, I advocate fishing dual hooks. Have that lower hook exposed. Typically I'll run like a 3/0 as my main hook and a 2/0 as a stinger, but when I get one hook, I switch that to a big hook on the bottom and just the shank on top. Bobber dogging is something you can absolutely do for Chinook and coho, okay? You'll find in higher water conditions in the fall, after we get rain in some of those deeper holes that you want to get into, I typically will run these newer Bomac bobber dog floats. Are fantastic. The last generation that came out with the EVA foam, it's kind of squishy. You can actually push it in. It's very durable. It bounces off rocks. It doesn't crack. It's not brittle. They got some really nice brass grommets in here. They slide up and down the line very easy. They have small, medium, and large. If you're bobber dogging for Chinook, you go with large floats because the amount of this new design, very hard foam, very durable. Put in here, they've actually cupped the bottom side of these floats now, so they actually grab even a little bit more water and continue moving with the river current versus just kind of sitting there. So the cupping on the bottom side of these floats is a nice up. Fishing deeper, bigger pools. Now, the other thing I can do when I'm using this big a float, now I use a lot of stick leads, also manufactured and put out there by Bomac, because they don't hang up and they keep your presentation moving. A single 6-inch stick lead weighs about 0.42, which is just under ½ ounce. You can actually take a dual lock ring, and I've put 2 stick leads in line. Now that looks like a lot of lead to throw out there, but if I was fishing, say, a 6-inch piece of 3/16 lead, it's going to get hung up all the time. I can fish these very sleek small stick leads that seldom, if ever, get hung. I put 2 of them in point, and the way that bounces around on the bottom and the low profile of this in nature, it just flat out doesn't get hung up. I don't use a dual lock swivel or dual lock snap in between these, you could, but those have points of bends that stick out, and those will grab items on the bottom. Those will grab rocks, those will get sucked down into stuff. So I use that little dual lock depth to get down to. I'm fishing something, say 8 foot deep. I'll go with the medium-sized float. On the bobber, feet above our weight. All that travels on top of the water. The lead is vertical. We want to fish our presentation about a foot or two. Fishing vertical, we want our float being My mic's out. Hear me? Now can you hear it? Hopefully it's going out there for the folks watching, because I'm just wasting my time if it's not. Right. Something to not be overlooked. How many of you grew up or still even at times do a little bit of drift fishing? Nolan? Huh? Yeah? So drift fishing is a great way to still get it done. I have buddies that are a little younger than me. They refer to it as free drifting. It's essentially drift fishing, but this rig up here I was throwing the other day, and it's simply, I wanted to have a dual hook on there, but I can't because it's a single hook fishery. So I got my egg loop shank on there. I got a little bit of a flotation on and some color contrast with a little pill, and it's just basically a standard barrel swivel with snap, and I put my lead on there, and that is only about 1.5 inches of that 1/16 lead. Barely weighs anything. Depending on the speed of your flow and how much water is moving, you're basically tossing eggs out there, letting them sink real slow, and they don't really have to come in contact with bottom all that much. You basically are floating them eggs through the water column on a free drift. If you want to be bottom tapping constantly, you put more lead on and keep it right down there on the bottom and drift fish it. If you want to have it suspended up a little bit, use only enough lead that you can cast out to the destination area that you want, and just let those eggs kind of float through the water column. You'd be surprised how many fish actually pick those up midway, not necessarily all the way to the bottom. Some of those kings will kind of suspend up a little bit. They're not always right down there with their nose in the dirt. If you're float fishing vertically and you're about a foot or two off the bottom and not getting fish, sometimes simply switching to your other rod, and I advocate using a spinning rod. This is it's a 10.5 foot rod, 8 to 17. It's a little lighter stick. You get a 20, 25 pound fish on, you're going to have a bit of a good fight on your hand, but you can get it done. Braided line, a 3000 or 300 series reel that holds plenty of line, has ample drag for Chinook. Again, top shot of 25 pound, and fishing about a 20, 22 inch leader, because we're drift fishing. This is not a 6 foot leader, folks. That is not drift fishing, okay? We're using about 20 inch leader. We're putting bait on here, and we're presenting the bait to the fish, not dragging the line through the fish. There's a big difference. So just some options when you are in pursuit of Chinook on our tributaries. Vertical float fishing, if you haven't done it, flat out gets it done. Eggs under a float works very well. Bobber dogging works extremely well also. And ultimately, if you want to go back old school, a little bit of drift fishing or free drifting with eggs presented at the right depth, right speed is going to get it done. This stuff is up here to look at after we get done with the show. Any questions? For those that are here, you guys just want more free gear. Okay. Hey, if you're watching and are on your way down here to Sportco, great. We got a couple seats open, plenty of swag to give away. We got more raffles going on. Great speakers ahead of us for the rest of the show. More how-tos. We got a cooking segment coming up. So stay tuned. If you're at home watching, great. Stay tuned. We're going to go to commercial break, give away some more prizes, and then we'll be back right here on FHN with our next segment with David and David IT when we come back.
Come out to break a night, the pink skies waving goodbye. She come out to break a night, leaving no traces around. She's trying to free a reckless heart. She's trying to be as light as a breeze. Queen of art, Friday morning. The queen of art, Friday morning. She come out to break the night. As sweet as always. You come out to break the night, you'll be wearing her charm so frail. Yeah, she's trying to avoid everyone.
Here.
We got started.
Oh, we're live.
Okay.
Oh, you did? Oh, okay. Well, hey, we're welcome back. We got a lot of stuff going on, a lot of activity, people walking around here, but that's the way it is when you do a live show. It's best that we don't try to stay on script because that just gets boring. Isn't that right, Barnum?
It does.
Yeah, so my microphone is definitely on. Got a green light. Everybody else got a green light?
Working on it.
Working on it?
Green light.
Green light. And you got a handheld, your button push?
My button's been pushed.
Your button's been pushed. Welcome back to Fish on Northwest. We are live here at Sportco for their annual tent sale. Lots going on out there. It is a massive hysteria. You know, cats and dogs running together, that whole deal, and lots of sales going on. The guys that work here and the owners are smiling from ear to ear because there's a lot of merchandise moving out that door, Barnum. So, would like to take the time to introduce David Trout. For you, those of you not familiar, David, number 2 on the show this afternoon. Natural Resources Director, Nisqually Tribal Fisheries.
Correct.
And a few other things that I'm going to make mention of here, and I wrote them down just because the length of list is, well, the list is lengthy. He served 12 years as the gubernatorial appointee to the Salmon Recovery Funding Board, the previous 4 years as the chair of that board, chair of the Nisqually River Council for the past 15 years, chair of the Puget Sound Salmon Recovery Council for the past 5 years, which keeps you extremely busy. So I find it interesting. I've appreciated and respected your works for years. You and I first talked about 9 years ago when I picked up the phone and gave you a call. You didn't know me from anybody and said, hey, I'd like to come talk to you. I was doing a little radio show back in the day, and you had your door open at your office. I came down there, new environment, new face, and we sat down and talked for a couple hours. It was fantastic. And I don't know if you remember, I was doing a little piece back then on the rise and fall of Puget Sound steelhead. And we talked about the efforts you guys had put in with WDFW and all the efforts that went into the harmonic sounding and the transducers and all that.
Acoustic tagging.
All that. And that was fresh and new and new. And the data for that is still used today. You know, Survive the Sound is up and running, and we use some of that data, and it's a great program. So anyway, appreciate you taking the time to come on our show. Thank you very much for being here.
Well, great to have the opportunity to come talk to you and your folks that participate in your show and people out here in the audience about salmon and orca and anything you want to know about. Anything in between? Yeah, well, you have your hand in it, to say the least, and I find it interesting because Nisqually is kind of at the tail end down there. I mean, you know, Hood Canal is a little bit beyond, but Nisqually's at the end of the line. Right. And what you folks are doing down there pays dividends all the way up north, all the way through the Sound, and a lot of people don't grasp that concept, and I think it's one that you guys figured out a long time ago, and are doing a great job. Let's start off talking about a handful of years ago, the reclaiming of the estuary waters in the Nisqually Delta and the old Browns Farm and all that area that's now, if your folks are driving up and down I-5 at high tide, you'll see how close that water finally comes back into I-5. And it was dry desert and barren for years. What was the process and reasoning behind all of that, and how did you guys finally figure out that that was something that had to happen? Well, it's a long story, but it's a successful story. That we recognized that the Nisqually Delta was key for our steelhead and for our chum and chinook back in the late 80s, early 90s, and started talking to the Braggett family that owned a farm on the Pierce County side of the Nisqually Delta, as well as the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, to try to see if we can return and restore the heart of the Nisqually back to producing fish. Those lands have been converted for agricultural uses back in the late 1800s, 1900s, so they were growing cows instead of fish for almost 100 years. And through our long-term relationship with the Braggett family, we bought the farm with a life estate for he and his mom to live out their lives, and slowly over time removed the dikes from the farmlands and opened it up back to fish. And we did that beginning in 1992 or so, and it really set the example for the big opportunity across the river with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to do 800 plus acres of their land. So the tribe started showing how this could work, showing that the fish use it, and then over time convinced the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service that it made sense. And so that in a combined effort between the tribe and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, we have the largest estuary restoration project on the West Coast. And it's been ultimately successful for fish and for birds and for everything that depends on things in South Sound. It's a really successful project. It's amazing. I think early on, the first year or two, I remember talking to a fisheries biologist with the state, and they were saying, yeah, you know, we do our small mesh dip net testing just to see what type of fish have migrated into there, and they had documented, you know, White River Springers were rearing in there. They had Green River Chinook. They had coho. They had almost every fish of these lower South and Middle Sound tributaries and main stem rivers that you can think of, if I'm not mistaken, that actually residualize in there and kind of take that time for rearing and growing and maturing before they smolt outbound. Right. 25% of the fish that we catch in the Nisqually Delta are from other watersheds. Isn't that crazy? So a large number from the Snohomish, from the Green, from the Puyallup, White River Spring Chinook love the Nisqually Delta. Yep. So it's not only just a Nisqually project, it's really a regional project. Yeah, very successful, as you mentioned. Unfortunately, areas like the Puyallup River cannot be reclaimed like that because it's been diked and channeled, and it's all about flood control and saving, you know, populations of people who have sprawled out in that lower farmland area now, and the housing projects continue, and that is, you know, that's just a wall of water moving. That's all it is anymore. We only rely on the upper stretches to try and, you know, utilize any of that habitat. Speaking of which, there's my segue. Let's talk about the upper watershed of the Nisqually River and the health of the habitat that is still, in some regards, in areas pretty pristine from how it's always been. Yeah, if you have a chance to float the Nisqually River from McKenna downstream, or even upstream from that, it looks like an Olympic Peninsula kind of stream because there really isn't any kind of impacts. There are very few homes along the Nisqually. We started an effort back in 1989 to protect the main stem Nisqually, and when we started, there was about 3% of it was in permanent protection of the areas that salmon use. Today, it's 77% permanently protected.
Yeah. Wow.
So the Nisqually is getting older and more complex, and it wasn't through a set of regulations, it wasn't through condemnations, it wasn't through enforcement actions, it was through working with our neighbors in a friendly relationship, finding willing landowners to work with us, and then either acquiring the rights to work on their land or just doing work on their land because that's what they wanted to do. And so we've made a tremendous amount of progress in the Nisqually, and the fish are responding. We're seeing Chinook and steelhead taking advantage of those habitats, and their numbers are increasing slowly, but increasing anyway, and it's all very important work. So the stuff that we're doing, your grandkids are going to enjoy a better Nisqually than I've seen in my lifetime, and there are very few watersheds we can say that about, and I'm proud the Nisqually is one of those.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about the hatchery programs that comprise the Nisqually River and the efforts you guys are putting in on Chinook recovery. Now let's make sure folks understand, the two hatcheries that operate on the Nisqually relative to Chinook are Nisqually tribe owned.
Correct.
Are they correct, right?
Yep.
And funding for those hatcheries come from a handful of different sources. What are some of the funding measures that help support those hatcheries run and owned and operated by the Nisqually tribe?
So maybe I'll start at the very beginning because
Okay.
it's sort of a long story, and I apologize if it's too long, but hatchery production in South Sound has been going on for a long time. The very first hatchery built in the state of Washington was built, is that me?
No.
Built in the Nisqually in 1898 at the mouth of Muck Creek, if you know where Muck Creek is on the Nisqually River. It only lasted a year because a flood took it out, but there's been a lot of hatchery influence in the Nisqually for a long time. And because of that, management systems and harvest patterns were set up to take advantage of big South Sound hatchery production, especially for Chinook and coho. So in the 50s and 60s and 70s, harvest rates for these fish exceeded 80%. So 8 out of every 10 fish coming back to South Sound was caught in a fishery of some sort. Well, as you can imagine, wild fish don't sustain very well at that kind of harvest rate. So while the hatchery population was able to maintain itself, the wild population slowly over time have diminished to the point where in 1999, the federal government decided to list Puget Sound fall Chinook, including the Nisqually, as being threatened under the Endangered Species Act. And the Nisqually population in particular is one of the key ones that need to recover for the South Sound area. So every area south of Lake Washington, the Nisqually is the key population that needs to recover. Now, what makes it even more complex is that because of the early hatchery influence and the really high harvest rates, the Nisqually wild natural Chinook went extinct sometime in the 60s and was replaced by a Green River hatchery fish that's been there since the early to mid 70s. So our obligation under Endangered Species Act is to use that Green River population and have it slowly over time become a Nisqually population. So we're doing lots of different things with our hatchery programs, with our habitat programs, to try to get this fish to become naturalized and wild again as part of the recovery effort. So I currently run 2 hatchery facilities on the Nisqually, one at Clear Creek, one at Kalama Creek, and then we also now run a program at McAllister Creek.
Right.
And we release about 4 million Chinook a year in total into the Nisqually system. 1 million of them are now going over to McAllister. The tribe now owns the old water intake facility for the city of Olympia. It's a beautiful spot if you've seen it. Great water, the best water in the state of Washington. Fish love it. So we're rearing about 1 million Chinook there and 3 million out of the Nisqually. We started the McAllister program about 4 years ago. So this year is the first returns of 3- and 4-year-old adults. And I suspect that in the coming weeks, the old fishery that used to be out at the Green Can in front of the Nisqually is going to go on fire. Because when we used to have fish coming out of McAllister and Nisqually, we had some pretty amazing, I'm a recreational fisherman as well, some pretty amazing recreational fishing days out in front of the Nisqually River. So with the weather change and the fact that we're getting now towards the time when Chinook start showing up, it might be time to turn some attention to the Nisqually to try to catch some Chinook.
Don't let this out, but the Green Can's been fishing pretty good the last couple of days. So, but you only heard that right here.
I was out there yesterday and it didn't do well for me.
It didn't do well for you yesterday.
Well for
so, what happened to your river? I drove over that thing this morning, and it's like, well, we're done fishing eggs for the rest of the season. I'm going to be out on the salt now because it's punched and flowing milky and just looking horrible. So
you know, the reservoir reverses the timing of the glacial flower in the Nisqually. So whereas like the Puyallup goes flower and sediment in the spring and summer.
Right.
With the Nisqually, it's late summer and fall. So it's now making its way through.
Yep.
This is what we're going to see for a while.
Yeah, it's going to be like that for a while. So releasing $4 million collectively annually, and your percent of return the last 5 to 10 years, can you gauge that or really reconcile what that is?
You know, we had some really bad ocean survival years with the blob and
15,
the warm
16,
temperatures.
yep.
And so the survival coming back from those years was right around 1% to 1.5%. And we historically have had the highest return rates in Puget Sound for fall Chinook. Normally it's in the neighborhood of 2 to 3%. We're starting to bounce out of the blob issues. The forecasts this year are up a little bit. I think as recreational fishermen, you should enjoy that. I think in the next 3 to 4 years, we're going to see better returns and better forecasts and better fishing opportunities as we come out of this. So, you know, this year the forecast back to the Nisqually is about 28,000 hatchery Chinook, of which the tribe is going to catch about 6,000 of those. So there's 22,000 fish out there for you all to catch.
Yeah.
Go find them.
So let's talk about hatchery production, tribal commercial effort. One thing that I've always been very mindful of and appreciate on your practices with the Nisqually tribe, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I've talked to a few of the infield biologists over the years as I'm walking the gravel bar and they're sampling fish, and you just strike up a conversation. That's how you learn what they're doing, why they're sampling, what they're, you know. A couple gentlemen have educated me over the years that, you know, we run our fisheries based on rate of return. If it's performing well, we basically give information to fishery managers and we come to a collective agreement on how many days of effort we can allow our commercial guys and gals to put out there. If the numbers aren't coming in, we're not seeing the adult fish in the year class we want and all this, we can bump that back. We may end up telling our guys and gals who are commercially harvesting with gill nets on the river, you're only getting 2 days for the next 4 weeks. Or we may expand that to 3. But I don't know of any other fisheries that monitor that closely and don't just set season and just go and then tally it up at the end of season and go, well, we kind of overfished it, or we didn't have enough fish and so there's really no harm, no foul. But maybe help us understand that that is or isn't what's going on with the Nisqually as you guys monitor and manage your rate of return and your harvest rates.
Right. So pre-1999, pre-ESA listing of fall Chinook, our fishery was ramped up like all the fisheries in South Sound, and we were fishing heavily. Our harvest rate was about 65%, so we were catching a lot of Chinook.
Yeah.
In our harvest, we would catch 20 to 22,000, mostly hatchery fish. But since ESA kicked into place, we manage our fisheries now not based on the number of hatchery fish that come back, but based on the number of natural fish come back. These Green River fish spawning in the wild. So it's the fish with adipose fins that matter.
Right.
So in our river, typically we'll get, to make the math simple, we'll get 30,000 hatchery fish and 3,000 natural fish. And so the 3,000 natural fish drive our harvest.
Right.
So we have to set our harvest rate to make sure we get enough fish on the spawning grounds of those natural fish, which means we're giving up a ton of hatchery fish. So this year I said 26,000, we're going to catch 6, there's 20 for y'all. That's a lot of fish that we're not catching that we could potentially catch in the old days that we can't do now. So we set our harvest schedules very conservatively to be sure that we make our natural escapement objectives. We have a very effective in-season update tool. We monitor our fishery carefully. We sample over 60% of the fish that are caught every day. And so that goes into a model, and if the run looks like it's smaller, we shut down. Unfortunately, if the run is bigger, we don't really have a chance to respond to that. Our schedule is a maximum schedule. So we only act for Chinook if it goes down. Now with chum, we can go either direction. If the chum run is bigger, we can go more. But we tend to be very conservative, and it really is driven by these natural fish. And so you're probably frustrated, and I know my fishermen are frustrated that there are we'll have 15,000 surplus hatchery fish in the hatchery. Minter Creek last year had 20,000 surplus adults that aren't being caught by you all, that aren't being caught by the tribes, that aren't being eaten by killer whales, that are basically just going to waste. And so one of the things that I'm proud of that the Nisqually tribe is working on and experimenting with this year, again, are selective tools in our commercial fishery. So ways for our fishermen...
Selective harvest.
Selective harvest, so we can catch hatchery fish and release wild fish alive. And we're trying a bunch of different techniques this year.
What are some of those, or how do you do that? Yeah, I mean, everybody's like, oh, they're just gill netters. And I know for a fact, years past, you guys were trying some different things. You mandated that you're tribal fishermen. came to your main facility, acquired the gear to construct their tangle nets.
Right.
They were to fish their tangle nets between hours of this and that. They had to monitor their tangle nets. They couldn't just drop them and leave. They had to literally sit there physically, monitor their nets, corks are bouncing. They were mandated to go out there, get the fish untangled. If it's wild, release it. If it's hatchery, bonk it. I mean, you guys were taking a really aggressive approach on that.
Right.
And now I know as of late, you're kind of heading back this way of trying out different means of selective harvest, which is not a term typically used when you talk about tribal fisheries. I want to make sure everybody understands that. But now we're talking with the Nisqually tribe and the man in charge, and you're telling me we're going seeking methods of selective harvest.
When we're being limited by this 3,000 fish and there's 30,000 to be caught, we need to have access to those fish.
Right.
And the only way to really do that is to be able to release some of these natural fish. So we're looking at all kinds of different tools. The tangle net, gill nets that we tried a few years ago, they work under certain conditions.
Right.
So they do not work well in pink ears because they catch a lot of pink.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to go through a pink and try to release a natural Chinook.
Sure.
They don't work well under the recent years when we've seen low water and high temperatures.
Right.
So the fish don't recover as well when you're releasing, whether
Sure.
from a net or from a hook and line as well.
Yep.
There are challenges to that.
Yep.
So we need to find tools that work under different kind of conditions. So we're looking at this year the construction of small fish traps with live boxes so that fishermen can individually go through and sort fish that way on a daily basis. One of the interesting things we're experimenting with, and who knows if it's going to work, but I'm from Hawaii, my family's from Hawaii, and my family there used cast nets, throw nets to catch fish. We're going to try cast nets in the Nisqually to see if we can find the right place, cast a net out, have the weights drop down, you catch 3 or 4 fish, bring it into shore, release the natural fish, keep the hatchery fish.
Yeah.
We're going to try anything that's possible to do this effectively, find the ones that our fishermen are willing to accept culturally, and then hopefully expand their fisheries while protecting wild fish as well.
How are they responding to these ideas? As you know, they come together and you as a community meet and you say, look, we are working hard to recover our fish. Here are some measures we want to deploy this next season. We need you guys to support this. Is it receptive, or are they kind of pushing back going, man, I just want to put my gill net out and go home and come back in the morning and clean it out?
You know, there's a little of both. I mean, change is always hard.
Sure.
And if you've been doing something your whole life and your father was doing it before him, to do something different is hard. But the alternative of not fishing or not having access to the fish is even harder. So begrudgingly but acceptingly, we're moving in that direction. It's just a matter of finding the right tool that makes sense to our fishermen that they're willing to employ. And so I think there's opportunities. If we can do it in the Nisqually and find the right tool, there may be other places where they're adopted as well.
For sure.
But it's really important to know that each tribe is a separate sovereign government, and we make our own decisions. So even though it might work on the Nisqually, it may not be embraced elsewhere, or it might be, but it's ultimately their decision about how they go forward and manage their fisheries.
I think the key point there is you say, hey, you know, we got 20,000 hatchery fish in the hatchery that we don't have access to because our model is, you know, held down by the number of our wild fish. That is our constraining factor.
Right.
And it's great to hear you say that. I mean, that's how we're managing our fisheries, even in river for tribal fisheries. I mean, it's a key component to making this whole thing work. I know you guys have a pretty solid relationship with WDFW. How much interaction is there with their data in their science and biology in river and testing and working with you? How much of that information do you guys rely on to set your seasons and really monitor your fisheries?
Well, we do have a very good relationship with Department of Fish and Wildlife and the staff there, and Ron Warren down to the field bios, you know, a very close working relationship with them. We depend on each other's information to make good decisions. So co-management is alive and working on the Nisqually River, and we appreciate it. Doesn't mean it makes it any easier when you have to make tough decisions around limited resources. And so the North of Falcon process, if you're familiar with that, can be very contentious and difficult when some stocks like the Stillaguamish or Mid-Hood Canal don't have as many fish and you have to squeeze fisheries. But having that good relationship allows you to make the really tough decisions professionally rather than having it go somewhere else. So we rely on them a lot. We've got a good partnership with the Fish and Wildlife staff and with the NOAA Science Center. I think it's important, and as we think about how we move forward dealing with southern resident killer whales and with salmon recovery and the use of hatcheries, and hatcheries are going to be a key piece to this, is that we don't do what we've been doing simply because that's what we've been doing. And so unfortunately the hatcheries tend to be an automatic. They just produce 4 million fish, you spawn, you do it, and you keep doing the same thing over and over again. And there are negative consequences to that. And we're trying to get away from that. So at Nisqually, we treat our hatchery as an experiment. Every year we're experimenting and thinking and trying something different. So for example, one of the issues we've noticed in our fishery, and you've probably noticed in your fishery, is that the average size of Chinook, hatchery Chinook, in the last 20 years has gotten smaller. And so it's gone from 18 or 20 pounds down to 13 and a half pounds.
Right.
So our hatchery Chinook are more like coho instead of Chinook. And that's part of the problem with the southern resident killer whales. They've evolved to hunt big, slower Chinook, and now they're being forced to hunt, in essence, coho.
Sure.
And it's a real problem for them bioenergetically. So the last 2 years, we've taken on an experiment to see if we can increase the size of our hatchery returns, the average size. So we've set up a small lot that we're separately tagging and monitoring, where we are spawning big females and big males to try to produce bigger fish into the future. Our fishermen are going to appreciate it. I think you all will appreciate that, and I think the whales will appreciate it as well.
Oh, absolutely.
So if this is successful, I think others will start to do it as well. The other thing that's important to understand about hatcheries, and doing it over and over again because it works, is that for years, hatchery managers were evaluated and their careers were based on getting as many fish back to the hatcheries as possible. So they figured out that window when you release all the juveniles, and when the adults come back, that would maximize their effectiveness. Well, right now today, we're producing about, it's a little bit less, but about the historic number of Chinook in Puget Sound. Not as many as we used to produce. In the 80s, we produced a lot more.
Yeah.
But if you go back 200 years ago and look at the populations that were out there, and you look at what we're producing now, it's about the same number of salmon in Puget Sound. But in those days, you would have Chinook leaving the river from February to October and coming back from March until November. But now we release all our fish in a 3-week window in May, and they all come back in a 3-week window in August. So it's hard to catch the adults coming back if you're recreational fishermen, because that's a bunch of fish coming through and you can't get them all, and for the tribe, same thing. But if you're a killer whale, all of your food is coming back at the exact same time.
Right.
And the problem they're facing is that there isn't food available from February to March, from November to March. So we're experimenting with changing our release timing, changing our strategy so we can maybe have longer releases and not evaluate our success based on how many fish we get back in the river necessarily, but just and how successful are we getting these fish out that more resemble a natural out-migration. And I think ultimately that's the key to success in how hatcheries play into the future. They have to be more integrated with what's going on in the world. They have to be supporting things like killer whales and recreational and tribal fisheries, and we need to be thinking about them as experiments, every one of them, all across Puget Sound.
Historically, like in the 80s, hatchery programs were all about just polluting the waters with tons of fish, as you kind of mentioned. And it was all a numbers thing. And releasing smolts at a certain point, sometimes based on budgetary restraints. Hey, we're going to run out of food here in 9 weeks, so we're going to have to up our release by a week and a half or 7 days or whatever it was.
Right.
But to me, it seemed like we built this common practice of releasing smolt that were undersized and not truly like of adequate size to produce a high survivability of smolt in the wild. Are you guys rearing these smolt to a size that now isn't like, you know, we don't want 24 smolt per pound. We want, 14 smolt per pound, or whatever the number is, to make them bigger fish, more efficient, better fitness before we release them? Or is it kind of just we have a standard of size of fish that we release and we've been doing it for 20 years?
No, so we're changing timing, and if you start changing timing, you're changing size.
Right.
So if you're releasing fish earlier in March and April, they're generally going to be smaller.
Right.
What we've noticed through the intensive monitoring we've done of the estuary restoration work is that there's a key size that the fish have to hit before they leave the Nisqually and hit Puget Sound and hit the ocean. And as long as they make that size, it doesn't really matter what the size of release is. So we're trying to find the place where the Chinook releases don't interfere with the natural production, but that at the end of the day, they make that size so that they're all leaving in a healthy way and they survive coming back.
Gotcha.
And again, we've got the highest survival of fall Chinook in Puget Sound out of our hatchery facility. So I think we're doing a fairly good job of finding that sweet spot. And now we just need to widen it a little bit and find out if there's more fish we can produce that'll benefit southern resident killer whales and more look like a natural component. But the challenge is with salmon recovery isn't so much about the fish. The fish know what to do. Chris Ellings, who's my lead salmon research biologist, likes to say, if we just take our foot off the throat of the fish, they'll recover. The challenge of salmon recovery is us. It's not the fish. We've got 4.5 million people living in Puget Sound. That's going to double in the next 15 to 20 years. If you look across the landscape, the way we've developed in the last 50 years, if we do that again in the next 50 years for the next 4 million,
we're done.
We're done.
Yeah.
Southern resident killer whales will disappear, Chinook will disappear,
Yep.
salmon will disappear.
Yeah.
We have to do it differently, and it's going to take a lot of courage and leadership from our electeds to make it happen, and for us as a public to support it. And that's really where we are right now. We're at that tipping point that if we don't do something different all across the board, then it is going to be game over, and we might as well move to Alaska and fish up there.
Yeah. Really good information. Appreciate all the work you and your folks are doing out of the hatchery program there, and for the changes you're trying to implement and just this ongoing effort of salmon recovery, orca recovery. You and I talked on the phone a couple times. This isn't your first visit to FHN. We're going to have you back in studio to tackle this orca component of this whole thing. As we mentioned earlier, it's not just a bunch of people carrying a flag that says orca as an excuse to dump more hatchery fish in the system. There's a lot of science behind this, a lot of reasoning, and a lot of sound minds that are making these decisions. You're one of them, for sure. Glad you're putting up the fight, because we need guys like you working cohesively with the state and the managers and the tribal management, all coming together. It was noted quite some time ago. Each individual group and of themselves, this is not going to work. We have to be on common ground to make this successful, and you guys are doing a great job in that regard. So, yeah, appreciate it, man. Keep it up.
Thank you.
Really appreciate you coming in. Give this guy a round of applause.
Now, I'd love to come back and talk orca with you, as long as we can split one of those orca loggers there.
This was a little gift from Art Taschel down at Point Defiance Boathouse there, and the reason behind that, as you know, obviously raising monies to benefit the orca recovery plan. So the Harmon Brewery out of Tacoma produces this beer. You can buy it at various locations, and every can that you drink, some of that money goes back to help save these orcas, and it's a good plan. But yes, we will have beer on ice for you when you show up at the house, my friend. So
excellent.
Appreciate it. Well done. Excellent information. I hope you guys enjoyed that, because it's really some good stuff going on with our fishery recovery. All right, we are going to jump out for a quick break. We got more items to raffle off. Sherry's over there waiting. So get your raffle tickets out. Make sure, if you are just joining us standing in the back, you guys need to find a chair. You need to grab your grab bag underneath it. You need to get your raffle tickets so you can win some free swag. We got fishing rods, we got crab pots, we got more stuff to give away. And you can only do that with your raffle tickets. So we'll jump out for a break. We come back. It's time to get cooking. I believe we got a crab-crusted salmon recipe.
Ooh.
And that is going to get served up to a couple of folks in the audience when this whole thing gets done. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after this break. More FHN from Sportco.
I had the world to give you, baby. I don't even have the time to tell you bedtime stories or to chase away the monsters from your mind. You know I can only give what I have. I'm sorry I was late today. I didn't get to see you dance the waltz. Spinning around the living room all dressed up in your mother's clothes. Oh, you know I love her even when we fight. When I get home to you, I just wanna hold you and love you when you calling my name. Here I am.
Oh, okay, we're sitting down.
921.
This is chaos, Dwayne.
I see. It's good stuff. We're live here at Sportco. We got the annual tent sale going on. It is August. It is busy. We got folks in the audience. They're getting raffle prizes, getting free stuff. We're going to get going on the cooking segment, but...
You two are on a date.
oh, look at that.
So
Frankie and Jim.
we just raffled off the seats at the dinner table.
You going to sit there or you going to sit
Well,
there?
I'm sitting right here because this is where I'm at.
Okay.
David can see me.
All right. You got us here, right? Okay, so we're live. It's a little bit crazy. We got stuff going on. Good information from David
man.
Trout.
Man.
A lot of folks have no idea some of that stuff that's going on.
No, I didn't at all.
Yeah.
Which is great. I mean,
Salmon
I'm hoping
recovery
they
is
can
huge.
continue that and use it to develop hatchery programs all across the state.
Hand mic, there you go. Grab that. We're going to get the cooking segment going here in a minute. We got a couple people sitting at the table. Here, let me push that. We got a couple people
We're
at
not
the
having
table.
date night yet?
Here you go.
I know. They're being shy.
All
Come
right.
on, guys.
If you guys want to forego your seat to the couple in the front here, the husband and wife or boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever we got going on, you're more than welcome to sit at the table. Two dudes don't want to do it. Let's get a couple up there. Come on.
Get up there.
Get up here. Here we go.
Come on, Nick and Bev, yes. I was hoping this was going to work. This is my
Yeah,
friends.
you guys have been here the whole show. We appreciate that. So we'll get you sitting down and you're going to get to partake
For
in a
some
fantastic meal.
crab-crusted salmon, like you wouldn't have had to ask me twice to sit down.
I know. So, all right, David, we're ready. We're going to go front and center on the cooking
I
segment.
guess I'll
Chef.
have to come to the fire station, Jim, and
Yeah.
cook it for you.
All
okay.
right. Shing, you guys take it away. You got it.
All right, Chef.
Hi, guys. Chef Keller here. All right, so we're doing a crab-crusted salmon with a Israeli couscous pasta.
Israeli couscous.
Okay. So we're going to talk about Israeli couscous here. I happen to get this one from Trader Joe's, but there's a couple different brands out there. One thing about Israeli couscous is that sometimes it gets toasted. Like you'll look at it and it has like different colored, because this looks like little BBs, what it basically looks like. This is it right here. There's another version of this is the called fregola, and that's the Italian version of it, and it's way more toasted. Like you can actually literally see in some of these, you can see a couple of dark ones in here. Fregola is like, there's some like almost like black, but it's good. You know, it doesn't taste burnt, but it is.
Okay.
That's from Sardinia. Okay, so we're gonna work, so the way I cooked this was I just boiled it like pasta. There's a new trend out now where guys are treating pasta more like a risotto. And that means that they are like sauteing it and then adding a little bit of liquid and then just cooking it until it's done by adding just a little bit of liquid at a time. And it produces a little bit of a creamier thing, but I don't know, I'm kind of on the fence on it. But that's another way you can also you cook your Israeli couscous. All right. All right, so we're going to work on our crust first. So the basic premise of how this actually started was that, in the restaurants we used to have a bunch of crab cake mix, and crab cake mix of course has a lot of like breadcrumbs in it to kind of give it as a binder. The problem with that is that if you did do that and you stuck it on the fish, that it kind of shrinks, it kind of separates, and it's not good. So what I'm trying to say is that the basic premise on this one is going to be is that I want it to be really wet, and we're going to smear that on there, and then I'm going to roll it in some breadcrumbs and garlic, and then going to sear it from there. So it's going to have a lot more moist. It's not going to try to separate because it's going to shrink and dry out.
Okay, and you started with very chunky crab
Yeah, and
to break it apart.
yeah.
I had my orders.
So we have our crab here, our beautiful Dungeness crab. And I'm just taking all the body meat. It's all broken up, and I'm going to use the claw meat later on, and I'll fold it into the pasta. Because this one we're going to just absolutely destroy all texture because I want it to be smooth, right? And so then we're going to add our mayonnaise to it. So that's about equal parts mayonnaise and crab. So I don't know if you can see that, but it's really loose. And I want it that way because I want it to be smearable. Yes, that's a word.
Smearable.
Yes. Yeah, I'm going to play Scrabble with that
All
one.
of his terms.
Come on now. Okay, adding a little fresh cracked black pepper.
See, I feel it's muggy in here. You say no.
No. Come to the south and down in Houston, you'll die.
I would.
Okay, so we're going to season our fish. I always use kosher salt. And this piece of fish, I don't know if you can see, I cut it like really wide and really thin. You know, because we're, doing it here, I had to cut it really thin because I don't have an oven to throw it into. Normally, the way I cook fish is I'll sear it and then I throw it the whole pan in the oven.
And you said you'd like the tail sections for this
Well, yeah,
recipe.
it's a good, way to use up your tail sections, because they're kind of on the thinner side. Alrighty, so always the presentation side is going to be not the skin side. So lay it on fairly thick. There we go. The problem with the crab, the problem with the crab crust is that, it's when you start getting down to it, it's kind of, it gets, loses a lot of its flavor. So another reason why I'm also doing it here is to try to keep a lot of crab flavor. So I'm just going to build this right on the cutting board here. Just a little bit of panko breadcrumbs. If you guys don't know about that, that's dehydrated white bread that the Japanese use. What are you doing?
Did Jim tell you to do that from the audience?
Okay, so now we're just going to roll our fish right in that crust with the garlic and the panko. Panko. Okay, so now we have our pan nice and hot, all ready to go.
I stand back.
Why, are you scared?
I think everybody else is, Chef. I'm used to you.
Don't be scared.
I'm not scared.
So we're going to get a good sear on here, and then we're just going to flip it over, and it should go pretty quickly.
Okay.
Okay?
All right.
All right. So while that is working, just going to switch pans. So now we're going to start working on our Israeli couscous. So I already have this cooked, so we're just making, a quick pasta.
I'm going to get past you.
A little bit of extra virgin olive oil.
See, I got the brand you requested.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Calavita. Gonna saute a little bit of zucchini. Nice and fresh. And then the other thing we're gonna saute is our onions. And the rest of the ingredients we are going to keep in raw and try to keep it crunchy.
Okay.
So let's get to
So you
cooking.
just dice them chunky?
Yeah.
First?
There we go. All right.
Take that away.
Yes, please. And this. There we go. We're cooking away.
All right.
Give me their plates, because this is going to go fairly quick. So what I'm looking for, because I only want to flip this one time, is I'm kind of looking at the edges, looking for some golden brown. Not quite there yet.
Oh, I should probably serve them their water.
Then we take a quick peek. Not quite there yet. Okay, so right now we're going to add a little bit more oil because the pan's a little on the dry side for their vegetables. Add about a tablespoon of garlic. Don't burn your garlic. Okay, now we're going to flip our fish. Nice and golden brown. There we go. Okay. Then we're deglaze our pan with a little bit of white wine. That's about 3 tablespoons. We're going to season a little bit with our kosher salt. Okay, now we're going to add our pasta.
Funny looking pasta.
What do you mean funny looking? Funny like a clown? What? All right, so then we're going to add our Kalamata olives sliced up. Cherry tomatoes. I'm going to do all of them.
A little bit of everything.
Yeah, good color, but we don't want to really cook them.
Yeah.
Add a little bit of butter. A little bit of Parmesan. Can you notice that I took my fish off the heat and let the residual temp just kind of cook it away? Yeah.
Bounce back.
A little bit of bounce back. So I'm adding about 2 tablespoons of butter and about equal amounts of Parmesan.
Okay.
Then we're going to add our crab. Just kind of just warming it through. I know, it's horrible. Okay, a little bit of fresh basil. A little bit of parsley.
Now you guys can really smell it this time.
Okay.
I always wish everybody could smell it over the...
Right?
Yeah.
And just a touch of fresh lemon juice. I want to say we're doing about a tablespoon.
And that would be exact.
Well, duh. Come on. So make sure you always taste your food, guys, before you serve it.
More salt?
No, we're good. We're good.
Done and done.
Actually, you know what? We're going to add a little bit more butter. Can't go wrong with more butter.
No. Or more crab.
More crab. Well, yeah.
Kind of out of that.
Sorry.
No, Barnum, are you salivating over there?
And we're good. That's
You guys
it.
didn't hear that. He's disappointed that he doesn't get to eat this week.
He's on a diet. I mean,
We've kind of blown his diet.
So I've blown your diet.
Yeah, you do. Thanks a lot. What are you trying to say? Did you hear that, Dwayne? I think he called your wife fat.
I did not.
Never.
Actually, I'm gonna get a little bit more. Alrighty. So, as you can see, guys, got a nice little golden brown on there.
May I turn this off?
Yes, please. A little bit on top. There we go. And so, yeah, we're just gonna put a little bit of parsley on there. And a little bit of extra virgin olive oil around. You can come out. There we go.
All right.
Easy enough, right, guys?
Yeah.
So we'll garnish with the basil. Sweet.
You guys like to speak to the chef?
Awesome.
Looking forward to this.
There goes, guys. This is our crab crusted salmon with Israeli couscous. Easy stuff. Okay.
Nice.
Sir?
Promise I won't put the microphone on.
Well, there we go. Enjoy that while everybody else sits there and drools over the fact that they don't get to eat that. Cheers. All right, another round for the chef. That was well done.
Thanks, guys.
All right, well, they enjoy that meal. We're going to jump out for a quick break. We got more raffle items to give away, so don't go anywhere. Get your raffle tickets out. If you want to buy up, you can purchase a couple additional ones for $1 a piece. You're going to increase your chances. I saw you got about 100 of them there, Barnum.
Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, we'll jump out for a quick break. We come back. David Stormer from WDFW is here, Fish Program Manager for Puget Sound. We're going to get a good recap on how this early run is performing in Puget Sound and what we have hopefully to look forward to. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. More FHN right after this.
At Metal Supermarkets, we understand your need for fast access to a wide variety of metals. So we've made it easy. Our network of stores carries a wide variety of metal in all different types, shapes, sizes, and grades, with no required minimum order size. Who could ask for more? Simply tell us your dimensions online, on the phone, or in store, and we'll cut or process the metal to your desired size, often while you wait. We offer same-day service and can deliver the metal right to your door or job site. We even source hard-to-find metals, so no matter what you're looking for, Metal Supermarkets can provide it for you. And we're conveniently located with brick-and-mortar stores in Seattle and Portland, so you can check out our extensive stock for yourself. Superior customer service is guaranteed. Quality service from real people who know metal. We are the small quantity metal experts. To place an order, simply call a store to talk to one of our knowledgeable customer service representatives. Fill out a quote request online, order off of our e-commerce website, or visit one of our many locations and pick out the metal you want. Whether you're a small or large business, government, homeowner, or hobbyist, we make it easy for you to buy the exact metal and just the amount you need. We've been doing this for over 30 years, so we know how to get it done. Metal Supermarkets, the convenience stores for metal. Visit or call a Metal Supermarket store near you today.
Sit up straight.
Nope, not doing it.
Are we back? Oh, see, missed my cue, Barnum. Thanks, buddy. Welcome back, Fish Hunt Northwest here live at Sportco. Chef just finished up a fantastic meal. Him and Sherry prepared that in crab-crusted salmon over couscous or some, huh? Israeli couscous, which was presented to Mr. and Mrs. Hazel here, watching the show today, participating, got their grab bags, getting their free swag, and of all things, Barnum, 15th year wedding anniversary today.
Wow.
Best meal they're going to find in all of Puget Sound.
Oh, that was
prepared right here at Sportco.
Ridiculous.
Costco. Sportco. Well, we're giving free food out for a minute there. I transitioned. I thought we were at Costco. So,
free samples on green label herring over there.
Free sample. Hors d'oeuvre cut green label herring. I said Costco. That's where I take Sherry for lunch. All the free samples, just walk out the aisle. That's date day. That's how we do it. So we're here at Sportco winding down. Tent sale, if you haven't heard. Lots of stuff getting blown out front. Jen, the hot dog lady's in the house. She's serving up some fantastic hot dogs out there. If you didn't get a chance to eat Chef Kelly's salmon, then get yourself a hot dog. It's the next best thing going. Absolutely. So, okay, we're going to wind down the show here. The final David of the day. It's been a day of Davids of all means. Just not that we put effort into making that happen. It's just how it unfolded for us, right, Barnum? So, David Stormer, WDFW Fish Program Manager, Puget Sound. Fairly new to the position, year and a half?
Just over a year.
Just over a year.
So
we'll give you a year and a half credit. I'm going to shortchange you here.
I feel like it's been a decade now.
So I bet you've learned a lot in the last year and a half.
I have. I moved here from South Florida, which is a very popular sport fishery.
Yeah.
But the management structure is so different here than it is there. The angler attitudes are quite different as well. So it's been a steep learning curve. But
I can imagine.
I'm always I'm a sponge for learning. So
yeah. Well, good.
It's been a great experience.
Doing a good job out there, that's for sure. So what are you seeing as we go into this first part of the season? We've had openings and have fished all the way through some closings already. Mm-hmm. The numbers have been pretty good for those that typically put effort in on those fishing grounds. They seem to be quite successful. A few folks struggling, but all in all, even up till yesterday, Area 9, just kicking out some donkey-size Chinook, and great numbers for a handful of folks out there putting in effort. Area 10 fishing very well this morning for a handful of our buddies out on the water. Both now Chinook and coho, and the pinks are coming in, I think, at higher numbers than we forecasted. So what are you guys seeing at your level on Puget Sound? How's it performing and where are you at?
We're seeing basically the same things you are, from the Straits on down to through Area 10. The catch rates are around the same as they were last year for Chinook in Area 5 and 6. This year in the San Juan Islands, I mean, we're closed in August, unfortunately, but we caught about 1,000 anglers in Area 7, caught about 1,000 more fish this year than they did last year. Catch rates were a bit higher this year as well. Area 9 just started off like gangbusters this year. Catch rates have slowed a little bit as we're getting into August, but I think through Thursday we were at about 95% of the quota. And so we probably chewed up the rest of it by the end of the day yesterday. But we're hearing great things for Chinook fishing in Area 9 and Area 10 started off hot as well. I think catch rates have slowed a little bit over the last few days. I think right now, or through Thursday, we're at about 60% of the quota there with about 60% of the season left. So we're hoping to get as many more days on the water as we can, and we hope maybe a next wave of fish comes through there.
Area 13 started to kick out some fish.
That's what we're hearing, and that's where I fish. So
good.
I'm excited
Welcome to the neighborhood.
About that. I love fishing South Sound. And perhaps with some of the other seasonal constraints that have been placed on our fisheries this year, the South Sound may see some.
We'll get
really
more
good
fish
catches.
push it down, because we're not intercepting them all up north, right? So. What are you hearing on the pink front? Sounds like out there in the Straits we had a push of pinks come in that would leave you suspect to think that there's a much higher number returning than, I believe the forecast was just over 600,000, 630,000, something like that.
Right, and We believe that was a conservative estimate
Yeah.
based on we came in under forecast in 2017.
Correct.
The spawning conditions weren't great in 2017 for fish going out, but we got out from underneath the blob and
Yeah.
had some hopefully some great ocean conditions. It appears that way anyway. And I think one of our dockside samplers last week in CQ got about 200 pinks for 100 anglers, so 2 fish a rod
Oh, wow.
there. So and big.
Yeah.
In some cases, they were bigger than the coho. So those are some encouraging signs about the pink run this year.
And the conditions are ocean conditions favorable. I mean, you
Right.
start seeing fish that big.
Yep.
These Chinook coming in, as you know, some of you sitting here today have wrangled in some decent sized Chinook already early season, big, healthy, fat, stuffed to the gills with, good sized herring inside of them. So they're chasing big baits, not always just going after anchovies. And for the most part, the buoy 10 fishery is fishing really well. The fish are big and healthy, big coho starting to show. It's exciting to think that our ocean conditions have turned around to be so favorable, because right now we're getting a big return of 3-year-old fish on some of these Chinook, which leads you to believe next year, following on the heels of this incredible coho amount that's supposed to be coming.
Right.
And if it comes through as it's projected, next year's Chinook fishery could be something that we have not seen in quite some time.
That's what we're hoping for, the exact
Yeah.
same thing. And in our the way we do our in-season estimates as we break them out into total legal, sub-legal encounters, we're seeing a greater proportion of legal encounters this year. So it appears on our end that the fish are coming back bigger as well.
Yeah, so we've seen a lot of size that, we're in the fall now, so as we enter the terminal fisheries, we start those jack counts, looking at those actual fish that are sub-legal, or adult, that would be considered a jack. We got a lot of jacks out in the Sound right now. Are we doing
Sort of
okay?
TBD on that, but
Yeah.
I think that's what we're hearing. There are a bunch of those.
Right.
of
So
jacks
we
there.
are hearing a lot of reports from anglers of, undersized Chinook under that 24-inch range. Do you guys see that as an indicator of the size of the run that could be potential next year? Do you see more encounters on sublegal Chinook as an indicator that there's more Chinook in the ocean maybe of that size?
I think that there's probably an association between
Okay.
those undersized fish and what future runs might look like, but I'm not positive on that, whether or not that's a good predictor of what we're going to see next year.
Right. Okay.
I think one of the questions that was brought up, and I thought it was a reasonable question, was that when we jumped our legal size limit on our Chinook from 24 down to 22, and we find ourselves catching a bunch of sub-legal or sub-adult fish, why out in the salt could we not work towards acquiring a jack retention that doesn't go against your adult retention, much like we do in the terminal fisheries? I know we don't want to utilize a bunch of those jacks for spawners, like in the hatchery environment and whatnot. I don't understand, nobody's really ever explained it to me, or perhaps I haven't asked the right question to the right person, but it would seem to me that if we're able to accommodate that retention opportunity in terminal fisheries in river, to say you can have your adults and your jacks, how come in the salt we can't bridge that gap and say you're allowed a 1 or 2 fish adult like on your Chinook, and you can also have like 2 jacks for the taking as well?
Yeah, a good question. I think that the way that our models work, our models, our preseason models are to predict impacts on the constraining stocks. I think that if we were harvesting a lot of those fish, there might be unintended impacts that aren't accounted for on the constraining stocks.
Okay.
That may be one reason. And I don't know, on the catch record card, there isn't a place for you to enter. It's for
salt.
For salt.
Correct.
For that, right. So
Not
maybe
yet,
we can,
until they design that in.
until we work that in.
So you
right.
build that in so
Right.
we can have that opportunity. It was a few folks have asked me that question. I said I don't have the answer, but
I can bring that
I
back.
can certainly ask some folks that may take that in the direction so we
Right.
can come to an answer and see if that's not something we could go down the road and actually look forward to.
Sure.
So anyway, just I know you have a busy schedule. We're winding down to the end of the show here. You altered your schedule just to squeak on by here.
Thanks
Give us
for
a quick
inviting
update.
me, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. So
Appreciate it.
just kind of a quick overview of Puget Sound, how it's performing. Fishing's been pretty darn good. I hope it sustains through the summer and into early fall here as they enter the terminal areas. And we got more to look forward to. And we will be in contact now that I got your number and know where you're working.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. And yeah, there's still opportunity out there, right? In areas 10 and 11 in the
13,
South Sound.
yep, absolutely.
For sure.
And for those that don't know, I mean, Area 13, we got that 2-rod endorsement.
Right.
Is you go ahead and buy that. Knock yourself out, man. You get out there in saltwater, utilize that 2-rod endorsement.
And we were able to get the minimum size limit down from 22 to 20 inches. So
yeah,
a lot more of those fish
we
will
were
be
out there,
available.
So good stuff. Well, David, appreciate you coming
thanks
by.
for having me.
Albeit short and quick, but to the point and on point. So appreciate your time. Barnum, you got any closing thoughts or want to wrap this thing up?
Wrapping it right now?
Yeah, dude, it's 10 after 3.
Awesome show.
Yeah, it's 10
awesome
after
video.
3. Yep. So want to thank everybody for coming out today. Don't go anywhere. If you got your raffle tickets, we still got a handful of prizes we're going to raffle off. If you have not done so, buy a hat or a shirt or a sweatshirt. I need to keep the roof over our heads, so, you know, one shirt at a time. That's how we pay the bills around here. Anyway, appreciate you tuning in online. This will be living there on both our Facebook page and our YouTube channel. You can go back and watch this circus unfold once again as it's recorded and living there. And not sure what that camera angle is, but that's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, we're good. So, want to remind everybody, if you haven't found us on Facebook, please do so. Like our page. Go to our YouTube channel. Subscribe, please. Follow us on YouTube and or Facebook. Stay up to date weekly with everything we have going on. Barnum and I take a lot of time to post a lot of information out there. We get into a little bit of, I don't want to call it political dialogue, but the information we brought to you today, David Champ, David Trout, David Stormer, we are in contact with folks at the state level and beyond just to bring the educational component to you folks each and every week, because it matters. Of whether or not we're going to be able to stay on the water and in the woods, it's that type of information that you need to be educated on. So that's why we do what we do, and we love what we're doing. So please continue to follow us. We thank you. With that, any final words? No, you guys are done cooking. We're out of here.
Good fishing.
All right, thanks for showing up. Have a great week. We'll see you next Thursday live from our local channel, 7 p.m. We'll see you.